Good morning everyone, it's myself Kenneth Campbell. It's been a while since I've been here, but I'll be your guide and narrator for today's Live at the Waterholes show. Warm welcome to everyone. Hope it's quite pleasant wherever you are. It's a very rainy day in the Lowveld, but the rains are really sustaining all the green growth in the African bush. Just a reminder, the show is live and interactive, and please feel free to send through your questions and comments, and we'll do our best to answer them and have some interesting discussions. We've started off here today at Lentor with quite a busy bunch of baboons up to their antics. Great way to start the show as always. Sorry about that, just a small technical glitch. You see we've got the baboons all over the show. A couple on the tree here above the waterhole Lentor. So the one on the right's on the precarious thinner branches. I don't know if they'll ultimately handle their weight, but seems to be fine for now. I always admire baboons for their bravery of climbing into a thorny Bachelia, or as they were known, acacia trees. I'm not a big fan of prickly things, so thorn trees are, while beautiful to admire, not very pleasant plants to deal with physically. See, Jive Bunny was mentioning that the lions were here at Lentor last night. It would be a wonderful day one day if we were here during the Live at the Waterhole session to have the lions nearby. I know I often see pictures of them or screenshots of the lions often visiting this waterhole at night, but that is just also the way it kind of works. We're not necessarily doing the show at the ideal time for predators. More ideal for birds and a few other mammals. But anyway, our baboons are always quite short visitors at the waterhole. But yeah, as they move off, we're going to hop on over to Founders. I don't think they're going to be around too much longer. There we go, a few striped horses, zebras as they're better known. Looks like a bit of a breeze blowing here at Mantis Founders Lodge. You can actually even see the wind is giving the one zebra a bit of a bad hair day. Can definitely hear something else in the background that's breathing. Might be another zebra, or could be a rhino nearby. Astrid, you'd like to know, how do zebras' hooves help them escape predators? So, I mean, obviously it allows them to run fast and stuff, but that goes without saying. We can assume that quite easily. But obviously, it's in a way a modified part of their foot structure, but it gives them great control because all of their energy and force is focused into one specific point, but still a relatively large surface area for their legs. So it helps them run far. Obviously the hooves protect them so they can step on hard things and run on hard surfaces. Allows them to turn sharply. Yeah, I guess you could almost say it's like a bit of an athlete's track shoe, but just a bit more hardy and designed more for endurance. And we've got two peaceful white rhinoceroses here under the tree, as we often find them. I would say that is their happy spot as always. Certainly the favoured shady spot here by mantis. I did for a brief second see a Cape wagtail next near the water's edge, but he's probably disappeared now behind a rock. It's quite nice now with the sun coming out a bit. This zebra also getting a very good scratch on the side of this rock. Just shows us it's not always necessarily the rhinos that make use of these scratching posts. There's a lot of other animals that also get some value out of it. Of course, the rhino's doing most of the heavy work on the scratching post. But this zebra seems to be enjoying itself quite a bit. I'm sure that itch has been bothering it for quite some time. There was a question from Birdie asking, how did zebra hooves evolve from multi-toed ancestors? So to anyone that did not know, but the ancestors of today's modern day horses or zebras or wild horses had 5 toes, as most mammals do. Obviously it's just modified in certain ones, but over time this started to change and fuse into the single hoof we are now familiar with today. But yeah, if you ever looked at the bones or anatomy structure of a horse, those digits are visible or can be seen, how they changed over time. But the reason for this was over time, as the forested environments from the Ice Age, etc., started to disappear and grassland started to dominate, that type of habitat tended to reward straight line speed more than, well, I wouldn't say straight line necessarily speed, but straight line endurance or a consistent speed compared to short bursts and grip and in a shorter, thicker environment. So yeah, that single hoof allows for that endurance, speed, or consistent speed and toughness. And obviously, as animals start to survive with those adaptations, it's passed on over thousands of, or many thousands of years. And that is essentially how zebras went from having, or horses went from having many toes to their single modified, highly effective hoof. I see we had a bless book pass through the screen or frame, but disappeared rather quickly. It's funny, the bless book never stayed too long. We always see them either just floating by, but they never really come for a drink. But I guess they also do feel a fair bit safer in the open areas compared to coming for a drink at the waterhole. Eden, you like to know the different types of herbivores based on what plants they eat. Essentially it comes down to, you've got grazers that feed on grasses, obviously sedges or shrubs also. Of course, grazers will sometimes browse a bit of leaves from trees, but they focus chiefly on grazing. And then you have browsers that will avoid grasses, and that's not a golden rule, but they will focus on eating leaves and stems and bark, etc. Those are pretty much your two splits. And there are some animals that are in between. They'll graze and browse. Impala are like that. Inyala. Kudus, for example, are chiefly browsers, bushbuck also. And the same goes for your zebra. They are chiefly grazers, also like your zebras. But it's not always the golden rule. Well, we're going to leave our peaceful zebras and snoozing rhinos and hop on over to Jabulani. Well, we've got a very graceful grey heron here in the rain. As I mentioned earlier at the start of the show, there's quite a lot of rain at the moment in the greater Kruger region, or the Lowveld as we call it. But it is a wonderful blessing to have all this rain. Things were getting a bit dry and needed a bit of a top up. I'm sure this grey heron is on the hunt for some amphibians or fish, but I think probably making the most of looking for amphibians. This is quite good weather for them. It's not too hot, it's cool, there's lots of water, so they can move quite a bit. A lot of frogs will also start to try and breed when there's rain, like the foam nest tree frog. We were in the Kruger Park not too many days ago, and saw how some egrets were hunting some breeding foam nest tree frogs in their breeding, I guess you would call it breeding accumulation or gather or aggregation maybe, where the female's in the middle and all the males cover her and are trying to compete to breed and fertilize her eggs. But there was an egret nearby that was picking a few unfortunate frogs from this large ball of frogs. And it was quite interesting because it was actually a cattle egret. And though cattle egrets will eat amphibians and a number of other creatures, it was quite interesting to see it negotiating the branches of the tree to get to the frogs, whereas you're normally used to seeing them in more grassy habitats with large herbivores or herds of herbivores. Hearing has now become as still as a statue, but I'm more than sure he's keeping a careful look for some unsuspecting prey nearby. But all this rain is really fantastic. It's really just gonna. The bush was really an overdrive, and lots of babies are being born now, and life is flourishing, but this will really kick it into overgear. There we go. You saw quickly that heron moved. It obviously picked up some movement there. We'll see if it maybe picks something up. Well, we're going to leave our patient heron. It sounds like our baboons have made a reappearance, fortunately, at Lentor. Well, the baboons are actually very photogenic today. Everyone's posing around the waterhole, almost as if a bit of a poolside vacation. You can see the one to the left is keeping a bit of a lookout, also giving himself a good scratch, while the younger baboons and female there have a drink of water. Of course, it's crucial to be aware near the waterhole, especially with the knowledge that lions were or are in the area. Someone got a bit of a fright there. You can also hear quite a few beautiful bird sounds in the background. I assume seed eaters. This male looks very puffy and fluffy. I always love these baboons from this part of the world. Their coats look a bit more cared for, or manicured, maybe pedicured, like they've had a good haircut. I find our Chacma baboons in southern Africa sometimes look a little scruffy. May have spoken a little too soon. It seems like the baboons are now quickly disappearing. Something's maybe put them on edge, or they're gonna go back to foraging. Well, most of the baboons have now moved off a bit, unfortunately. We're gonna head on over to Tau and see what's waiting for us there. Well, if I'm not mistaken, this is black-crowned night heron. A very lucky sighting. They're normally nocturnal birds, so this is very cool. It is funny, sometimes these night herons will hide incredibly well, and then other times they will stand completely in the open like this and make themselves available for all to see. There's two species of night heron that are found in southern Africa, the black-crowned night heron and the white-backed night heron. The black-crowned night heron is much more common and easier seen. I say, well, within parameters, but yeah, of the two, much easier to see. There's your white-backed night heron, is quite a special and rare sighting. But still very cool to see this. I can count on one hand the amount of times I've actually seen night herons. It's not a regular sighting. And they obviously specialize in hunting fish and frogs more at night. You can see those large eyes that they have. So you won't really see them doing much in the day. This is why this fellow is just perched and preening himself, taking it easy. Willow had a question, I assume this is in regards to the grey heron we were looking at earlier, but what happens during courtship and how do the parents care for their chicks? So in general, herons are known to nest on what they call heronries, which is generally a dead or big old dead tree or big tree near a water source on an island or somewhere. They do this just to pick a spot that's safe from predators. It's actually quite funny, sometimes in urban areas you see it also often. They know if they nest in a big tree in a shopping centre, they're safe from predators. There's an interesting way in which the herons have adapted to nesting like this. And when I speak of herons, I also mean egrets. But yeah, so they'll nest in this large community type nesting. Each pair has their own nest, and it's a bit territorial, but anyway, everyone finds their spot. And then both parents will bring through food and feed their chicks. Sometimes there is a bit of competition between the chicks, and not all will make it to adulthood. There's a bit of infanticide that takes place. But yeah, and obviously heronries are quite noisy with all these different birds nesting and squawking. Also a bit messy. That's what doesn't make them too popular in places where they have these urban nests. But yeah, very interesting.
Join our expert guides at dawn for a live, immersive safari as the bush comes to life.
Found ourselves a chameleon, and look how he's changed color.
Every sunrise brings new discoveries.
Pound for pound, a leopard is one of the strongest cats around.
Ask questions, share your thoughts, and connect with nature live and in real time.
Great excitement, great happiness.
Start your day with adventure. Are you ready for the adventure of a lifetime? Wild Earth Travel's newsletter is your passport to a magical journey. Explore exclusive travel options featuring special offers at stunning Wild Earth locations and all hosted by your favorite presenters. Don't miss out. Head over to our website and subscribe to the Wild Earth Travel newsletter today and stay in the know on all our unforgettable adventures. Wild Earth Travel, where Africa comes alive.
Certainly quite a bit windy today in town. Well, we're going to leave our roosting night heron. I'm sure he won't get up to too much more while he rests. But we're going to go over to Jackie's dam for some more bird action. Ooh, that's a nice surprise. Some stunning woodland kingfishers perched here. You can also see a few weavers moving around in the background, but of course the striking kingfishers are the focus right now. Their colors are really sticking out and looking beautiful. A very synonymous bird with summer in southern Africa anyway. It's with great excitement that many birders wait to hear the return of their call echoing throughout the bushveld. I know on many afternoon or morning drives this time of year you will often hear the sound serenading you. It's simply stunning. Oh, that's unfortunate. Our kingfishers have done a dive on us, excuse the pun. It's interesting that these woodland kingfishers are hanging out here near the dam. I think it's more just purely by chance. Woodland kingfishers are not kingfishers associated with aquatic habitats. They don't catch fish. They are terrestrial kingfishers, so they will catch insects and of course amphibians in drier habitats, or lizards and small mammals, but you will not see a woodland kingfisher diving into the water to catch a fish. Oh, there we go. Our kingfishers made a return. I think I saw that no, I don't know if I saw the other one, but this is probably a pair here. I'm sure they are capitalizing on something here. You can see a lot of action with the weavers at the back. might be that they do have a nest here. They might be making use of a cavity nearby, and that's why we're seeing them around here. Also hence the busy activity. It would probably make sense because they do make use of old woodpecker or barbet nests, and I'm sure there's quite a few big old trees around the vicinity of this dam, so they are probably capitalizing on that. And there it has returned. They are such beautiful birds, it's hard to not take note of that. It would be very cool if we could find the nest, but I must say that's one thing I've never been too good with. As much as a proficient bird watcher I'd like to think I am, I'm not great at finding birds' nests, which is I think a testament to a bird's ability of hiding their nests and keeping them hidden from predators. They're very good at picking safe spots that will ensure the survival of their chicks and keeping them out of harm's way. Except of course the weavers, their nests are quite obvious, but once again they're built in such a way in certain locations that keeps them quite safe. The only real predators to the nests being snakes or monkeys at times, and some other birds of prey, but otherwise they're quite inaccessible. It's interesting to note, I think many people don't realize that monkeys can be or can have such a detrimental effect to bird populations, but in areas where they intermingle with urban environments or where their population explodes due to a lack of predators, they tend to have a harsh effect on nesting birds because they are nest raiders. Monkeys will happily eat nestlings or eggs that they find, so there is always a balance. I know in a few built up eco or greener properties like golf estates, etc., monkey populations there tend to be quite large, and they are a bit detrimental to the birds in the area. But everything has its balance. Iris, you'd like to know how do they select and prepare nest cavities. So the woodlands kingfisher, like I said, it makes use of old woodpecker or barbet holes. Obviously they'll investigate and look if they can fit in the hole, if it's dry, etc. They don't want a nest that's going to leak or fill up with water, but they will spend a bit of time investigating. But yeah, that's obviously the benefit of using another nest made for you. You don't have to do too much effort. They just line it with certain materials, etc. It does appear that our kingfishers have disappeared, so we've just come back over to mantis. You can see the wind is still blowing quite strongly here. I think there's a few clouds in front of the sun. It's affecting the lighting ever so slightly, but it will brighten up. The wind is looking rather strong. It doesn't look too bad on the water, but when you see the dust puffing around, it's a testament to that. But this part of the world is well known for its strong breezes and winds. There we go, but more light. The rhinos are looking rather happy as usual. Getting a good scratch and a wallow. And the zebras are just milling about. Peyton, you'd like to know how do white rhinos use tail position to signal alarm or threat? So generally when they relax, their tails are, as we see now, flaccid and hanging and not doing too much. Rhinos have obviously got quite small tails, so don't swing them around too much. But when they're feeling threatened or stressed, they will curl their tail up almost, it looks quite a bit like a pig's tail. They'll curl it up quite a bit. Or they'll raise it, etc. And that's generally a sign of stress or concern for them, or awareness, I would say. They obviously don't rely on it too heavily to signal one another. Obviously such a big body and having such a small little tail, it's not exactly the most obvious or notable thing, but it is something you can watch for body language to understand the feeling of the rhino. And it's quite the same in a lot of other animals. Elephants, for example, do quite similar things. They don't curl their tails, but if their tail becomes parallel or stiff, it's also an indication of displeasure, stress, or awareness. But very good cues if you're ever observing elephants or rhinos to take note of that. And if they start doing that, it's either a sign that you are distressing them, or there is something else nearby that has caught their attention. But they obviously make a lot of use of those satellite dishes for ears. They're always scanning and listening to things going on around them to detect danger or what's happening. Incredibly acute hearing, of course. I can imagine for a rhino with their very sensitive hearing, having so much wind blow past your ears or hearing that sound must be also maybe slightly annoying, but I guess you adapt or get used to it. But I can only imagine that feeling for them. But I guess their ears are also designed in such a way that the wind is not necessarily too much of a bother. But it'll also be quite interesting to be able to swivel your ears in different directions, etc. It's quite comical or interesting how they can control them independently. It's always fascinated me ever since I was a child, the first time I saw a rhino. Jive Bunny, I do agree, it's quite a treat to be able to always count on seeing rhinos here at Founders, and the way they interact and behavior gives us quite a intimate look into their behavior and the way they go about things. I don't think you'd have many of the other cameras to witness or watch white rhinos at your leisure. It would be very cool if we ever saw a black rhino once on a camera, but I don't think that will often happen. And they generally tend to come during the dark hours. It's not a regular occurrence. Black rhinos are of course very secretive or shy. Ooh, there's a bit of excitement, and there was also the tail I was talking of just as he left frame. You can actually see it now, how his tail was curled up, etc. So signaling a bit of annoyance. But it seems like there was a bit of aggression. I don't think that a female appreciated that bull getting too close, so a bit of excitement taking place. Also, once again, very cool that we get to see these social interactions. You don't often always see it out in the field. There was a question from Odette: why are white rhinos the most social of all the rhino species? So, your white rhinos, it kind of fits in with their grazing lifestyle in a way. They tend to live in very open areas. That's part and parcel of grazing. You're not going to live in a thick forested environment if you're more of a grazer. So that social structure emanates from that. So it allows many of them to feed in the area without as much competition. So they're happy to interact or tolerate each other in an area to an extent. And also these open environments in a way favour group vigilance. So if they're sticking together, there's a bit of safety in numbers. They're aware of any threats approaching them. Of course, it's generally cows that are more gregarious, and the male will stick with them. It's not often that you will see bull rhinos necessarily associating closely together. A dominant bull will allow a subdominant bull in his territorial tolerate it as long as he behaves himself, but if he gets a bit clever or challenging, it will not be tolerated, of course. But yeah, if you take all these factors, they kind of all work well together, which allow white rhinos to coexist relatively happily with one another. Whereas black rhinos, they tend to only really socialize ever so slightly together at waterholes, but from there on they disappear off into their thicker environments and tend to stick to themselves. Well, as the rhino meanders off, we are going to head over to Tortillas. Quite a pretty setting here at Tortillas. Got a few gazelles coming down to drink, or they may be bypassing the waterhole. Gazelles are such pretty antelopes. I must look up which specific species of gazelle this is. I'm obviously much more familiar with our local springbuck that we get in South Africa. It's the only gazelle-like antelope we have. They certainly... no, they've got a preferred drinking spot. That's what's happening. I thought they were well on their way, but there's quite a pretty male here having a drink. No, I do need to check myself, just out of a experience factor. I think these are Grant's gazelles, but I will confess it's not an animal I've necessarily seen in the flesh. Quite a beautiful animal nonetheless. Certainly a dream of mine to go see them one day in the flesh. But it's nice that we've got this opportunity to enjoy them in their natural habitat. One of the wonders of the 21st century. Quite a stark climate these gazelles are in right now. It looks quite warm and sunny at the moment. It's really raining at the moment here in Hoedspruit. I'm getting a good dollop of rain. Very happy and thankful for it. Certainly looking forward to some sunshine when this is all over though. So there was a few questions coming in regarding baby elephants and baby rhinos, that when they're born they tend to have better eyesight, but then of course we know that elephants and rhinos are infamously known for having poor eyesight. This is more the case in rhinos. An elephant's eyesight is not, obviously it's not developed to the level of an eagle or other predators, but they can see quite relatively well still. Sorry, I got a bit distracted by those birds, but it actually just generally comes down to the fact that baby animals tend to be a bit more alert. They're always looking, etc., but they also can be a bit careless. But it's not that their eyesight is necessarily better adapted or stronger when they're born, and then it just weakens on its own over time. When you look at rhinos and elephants, they tend to rely a lot more on their other senses, hearing, smell. If you look at both of them, they've got incredibly acute senses of both. So their eyes on it never necessarily their prime way of seeing. Also, they've got size on their side, so just that size alone, it means they don't always have to be too careful of what they wander into. But while using smell and hearing, I think it's also quite an abstract concept for us as humans, since our hearing and smell, our hearing is quite good, but our sense of smell is not as acute as animals. But just those two items can tell you a lot about the bush and what's going on in the immediate area. If you pick up a scent of something or hear a slight branch breaking, then you already know there's something going on. So they already avoid it, whereas humans are quite reliant on their sight to find things or detect danger, and sometimes it's already too late if you rely on sight like that. We see the same in antelopes or herbivores. They'll often walk into predators, and even though their sight is also not bad, it doesn't necessarily stop them from becoming lunch or a meal for someone else. So all these senses intermingle in ways to help. But yeah, if you just looked at it off of a sight thing, it's quite easy for animals to camouflage or blend in, but it's not easy to mask your scent or not make noises. Those are generally much more solid giveaways of a predator lurking. Willow, you'd like to know, how does the Thompson's gazelle differ from the Grant's gazelle in appearance and habitat? And I was reading up about this in one of my field guides now. It's quite interesting. So the Thompson's gazelle are essentially small, stripy grassland specialists. That's why we often see them in the Mara associating with the wildebeest and the zebra migration. It's quite open grassland areas there. While your Grant's gazelle are larger, a bit more paler, so this male browsing here hasn't got that black stripe on the side like a Thompson's would. And your Grant's gazelle is a lot more drought tolerant, a resident of open savanna and bushveld. So we can kind of see here around Tortillas it is quite a bit more shrubby, drier, rocky, arid habitat. I was also reading that white above the tail, white area, but that's indicative of Grant's gazelle. Thompson's gazelle doesn't have that white right above the tail there, so that's also another way that you can split the two. Rumi is asking, do female Thompson's gazelles, and I'm sure this goes for most gazelles, hide their fawns? So I know Springbok do it a bit, but when the the fawns are very young, they will hide a bit. They'll obviously not stay far from their mothers, but while the mother's grazing or feeding in a certain area, they will lay down and stay very still. That is their best way of survival. But of course, when a predator does show up, they will get going and kick it into high gear for some speed. But yeah, normally when they're very small and just been born, they will keep quite a low profile and hide and try blend in with the surroundings. But the mother won't necessarily just leave the young fawn for hours on end like we do see with deer, etc., or they hide off in one spot. You tend to see it a bit more with roan antelope or sable. When they're quite young, they will hide in a bit of thick brush, since they're a bit more sedentary, whereas your gazelles obviously don't have a fixed territory of where they're staying, or will roam quite large distances. It's quite beautiful seeing all these gazelles here at the waterhole today. It's also a good example of what we were speaking about earlier between grazers and browsers. We can see gazelle are happily feeding on grass, but like we also saw, the one male was also quite happily feeding on this shrub here. So as a generalist, they are quite adaptable to the conditions they're faced with, which gives them quite an edge in these harsh habitats. I see we have a few warthogs now joining us. They almost look like little rocks, quite well blended in there. It's almost a game of spot the warthog, or what is warthog and what is rock. Disappear quite quickly if they stay still. Also got quite a few lapwings and a cattle egret hiding from a bit of a wind there. So we've got a bit of a different egret slipping in there. I assume it's a great egret. You can see him doing a fancy jiggle with his neck as he moves through the grass there. It's quite funny, it almost looks like a dancing snake. Quite a bit of activity. There's the mother warthog. I'm sure those cattle egrets are quite close to them as they feed, hoping they flush some insects for them to snack on. Still quite entertaining watching that great egret jangle its neck around there. So obviously, there we go, try to catch something there, probably a small bug, or may have missed. I don't think it actually caught something on that strike. But lapwings are certainly looking very relaxed. Egrets are all over the show trying to catch all manner of insects and frogs that may be hiding in this little wet grass or wetland essentially. That's part of the waterhole here. These little warthogs are very cute, however. Very cute before they turn into larger, less attractive looking warthogs. Of course, it's quite a perilous life for them at this stage. It's not easy becoming an adult warthog. When you're a baby warthog piglet, you're on the menu for most things, from birds of prey to pythons to hyenas and big cats. So certainly got their work cut out for them to survive, but of course they are incredibly quick. Now, we've also got a baboon joining us here. Startled those little piglets a little bit. When I was in Kruger this week, we had an excellent sighting of wild dogs sleeping in the shade, and not too far away was a female warthog with her piglets playing around and grazing. I must say I was a bit concerned the wild dogs would become aware of their presence, but it seems like the female warthog was able to steer her piglets away from the sleeping wild dogs. Would have been obviously quite an interesting sight, but maybe in that case not one I really wanted to witness. I don't think the warthog in that situation was aware of the wild dogs, however. These type of conditions, obviously it's not in the favor for the warthogs. It's windy, so it's hard to hear. They're down in a bit of a depression, so can't see too well or smell too well unless something's approaching with the wind, and they will smell it. But yeah, this would quite well favor a big cat's ambush if it was looking to make a meal of a warthog right now. Saren, you'd like to know, why do warthogs enter their burrows backwards? The bottom line is, obviously a warthog's tusks are its greatest weapon or way of defense. So if it goes in facing forward and something tries to get it from behind, it's not easy for it to turn around. Depends on the size of the burrow, but even though it's big enough to accommodate a warthog, they can't necessarily easily turn around. So yeah, if it's facing out that way, it can swing its tusks around and defend itself, and not many predators will want to take a chance. They can be quite effective and vicious with those tusks. So yeah, that's the main reason why they enter their burrows backwards, so that they can handle anything, and if they need to make a quick getaway, they're already facing the right direction, so they can obviously get to top speed much quicker than they would if they would still have to turn around upon exiting. You can see this baboon is foraging a bit, but they always certainly look quite naughty. I'm sure he's up to no good, or he's got a trick up his sleeve, but it does actually seem like he is just feeding on the grass, and obviously there's some sedges, so there will maybe be some tubers that he will try feed on or get hold of. But quite interesting to see him feeding like this. This is obviously a young adolescent male that doesn't have a troop of his own. He's been kicked out and he's a bit of a lone ranger now. So his time will come one day when he's a bit older and he can challenge for dominance. But until then he's got to look after himself. I think we've had a few nice sightings here today, tortillas, but we're going to pop on over to Serengeti and see what's waiting for us there. For a second I thought that was a crocodile, but it is actually a swimming baboon. It's quite a nice little bit of entertainment for us. It's always very entertaining to see baboons swimming like this. It's not something you always see, and obviously they're quite cautious. They'll only do it in a water body where they're quite sure that there's not crocodiles present. But I'm sure this will turn into quite a pool party. Obviously a great way to cool down and quite a bit. Very comical to watch this. Obviously an elephant pool party is always great fun, but I think a baboon party is on a whole nother level. Quite jealous of these baboons. It looks like quite a relaxing way to spend the day, just floating around in the local waterhole. Not a care in the world. Obviously the adults have got the important job of keeping a lookout for any dangers, while the young baboons can muck around a bit and have a good swim. I'm gonna come back here. Something went a bit wrong there, but I think those baboons are also moving off anyway. Luckily our gazelles have also joined a bit for another drink. Looks like a few females. You can see that with their smaller, thinner horns. Actually quite curious. I think that other one there may in fact be a Thompson's gazelle, but I'm just trying to look at the identification features, but now they've disappeared, so we'll have to have another go at that just now. Don't know what's no, it doesn't seem like anything's got anyone on edge. They're all just milling about. Quite a serene setting. The warthogs are munching away. Mr. Baboon is foraging quite happily. And the gazelles are just doing their things. The birds are also looking quite happy. funny seeing how aware these gazelle are. They're quite cautious near the edge of the water here. You can see it's quite shallow, however. I doubt a crocodile would leap out and grab them. But obviously it always pays to be quite cautious. Interesting that one gazelle's got such a dark side stripe there. And just out of the size it looks a bit smaller, but I don't think that white is still above the tail there, so I do think it's indicative of it being a Grant gazelle, maybe just a very young one. It's always fun working on the technicalities of animal identification when it comes down to these small subtle differences. It's nice when it's a bit challenging. Lizzie, you'd like to know how the blacksmith lapwings diet differs from other lapwings in Africa. So your blacksmith lapwing is your most common or most widespread lapwing. Obviously they favor more wetter habitats, so you often see them near water bodies or vegetation like this, but obviously moist grass. This is once again favored by the urban spread of humans. Obviously in suburban areas or schools or sports fields you'll find blacksmith lapwings. And also the accumulation of water in these areas also favors them, so that's one thing. But essentially chiefly their diet is insects. I do think they would snack on an amphibian if they could get it in their mouth or they got hold of one, but I think essentially they will specialize a lot more on aquatic invertebrates or invertebrates that favor these moisture conditions. That's probably your biggest difference compared to your other lapwings. That being said, most of your lapwings throughout Africa tend to focus more or are found in association with moisture habitats. Each one's obviously got their more specific niche. I'll do some reading a bit on what that specific niche is, but I don't think it's too specific. I think they're just a bit more adaptable, that they don't necessarily require very specific aquatic habitats. They're a bit more generalistic compared to some of the other ones, like the spur-winged lapwing or the long-toed lapwing. Hence why we see them a bit more, and they do a bit better throughout a number of habitats. There is another lapwing called the crowned lapwing. They tend to live on open, drier habitats, so they would also be eating invertebrates, but probably more grasshoppers or terrestrial insects. You can see this great egret is hunting quite well. It doesn't look like a yellow-billed intermediate egret to me. Those completely black legs being diagnostic in this situation. If it was the yellow-billed egret from the knee up, it would have a bit of, or it would be a bit of a, it would be yellow, sorry. They do, however, both like this type of habitat. but it is looking like a great egret to me. Jane Ludlow, you're asking about if we compare domestic chickens, wild birds, domestic chickens lay eggs almost every day in most or some cases, and is it the very special feed that domestic chickens are fed, or what is it? So obviously the feed plays a role. It is special, but it's also, I wouldn't call it too super special. The main thing behind it is it's grains with a lot of protein, energy, etc., compared to what a foraging bird would naturally find in the wild. Obviously why you get free range eggs, and then your more traditional eggs from chicken coops. Difference of diet there, and obviously that's what there'll always be a better return when you are working with chickens in such a high intensity production environment. But essentially what it really comes down to is chickens have been selectively bred for thousands of years through humans, and we've bred them to express these traits, to lay eggs much more than most normal birds would, or naturally they would in the wild. So in a way their bodies are essentially fine-tuned for egg production. Whereas your wild birds will usually lay a small clutch for a breeding season and stop. Ostriches or guinea fowl, for example. Chickens have been bred or selected in such a way to lay continuously, so that's kind of what splits the two there. On top of this, of course, you do need quite a high protein and calcium rich feed to support the rigors or the requirements of this, so that goes hand in hand. Not to say it's a must, but depends what you as a farmer are maybe trying to achieve. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's more due to genetic selection or selective breeding over a long period of time. But nature-wise, or wild birds lay fewer eggs because they're prioritizing survival over productivity. Every egg they lay is a great investment in energy. They give their all to make sure it will survive, and their offspring will be there. So just laying eggs the whole time and hoping for the best is not really ideal. I'm sure this egret is going to catch something interesting just now. We generally always have a good track record of watching the egrets or herons catch something quite cool. I don't think this egret will necessarily pluck a fish from the water for us, but he may get hold of a frog or something. But he is certainly hard at work. Of course, dragonflies or other large insects will definitely be on the menu. I don't know how easily we'll see that, but this egret definitely would not be here if there wasn't a suitable food source to keep him busy with.
Wild Earth Travel has a green season special just for South Africans. Explore Botswana's Okavango, a remarkable mosaic of delta and savanna teeming with wildlife. Stay in elegant, luxurious tented camps deeply connected to the wilderness. Discover the Okavango on exciting game drives and tranquil boat journeys. Share stories beneath the stars, remembering what it means to safari through Africa's wild south. Wild Earth Travel. We're waiting for your call.
At Wild Earth, we believe every story has the power to create change. That's why we've launched the Wild Earth Impact Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to conservation and social impact. By showcasing conservation stories, we can change lives, protect nature, and empower communities. We have partnered with Empowers Africa to accept tax-deductible donations from US donors. Your donation will help fund critical programs that support our mission. Join us and be part of the change. Join our expert guides at dawn for a live, immersive safari as the bush comes to life.
Found ourselves a chameleon, and look how he's changed color.
Every sunrise brings new discoveries.
Pound for pound, a leopard is one of the strongest cats around.
Ask questions, share your thoughts, and connect with nature, live and in real time.
Great excitement, great happiness.
Start your day with adventure.
A question coming in from Africa. I assume it's not the continent itself speaking to us, but besides feeding, what other roles do bird beaks play? So birds can use their beaks for preening. They use it to maintain their feathers. I think it's been discussed a couple of times, but essentially birds, the structures of their feathers function a lot like a zip does. So they kind of mesh together to form a structure which they use to fly, and sometimes this gets disrupted or damaged. So by using their beak, they can kind of comb and reset the structure and make sure everything aligns up again and is well managed or well structured again. They also have oil glands on their bodies, and they'll use their beak to spread this oil, which helps maintain their feathers, etc. So beaks are an integral part of their preening and cleaning process. And of course your beak is also, much like feeding, can be used quite defensively. If they choose to pick, they can defend themselves to an extent from predators. They maybe poke out the eye, or it's quite a sharp thing, and they can also bite, not too hard, but yeah, in a last ditch effort they will use their beaks to try to defend themselves, sometimes also fighting with other birds, and they'll use their beaks. Well, we're going to pop over to Tile for a bit. We've had a good run here at Tortoise. Looking quite green and vibrant here at Tile. It's been such a while since I actually got to see the Tile waterhole for my adventures the last while, but certainly stunning to see everything looking so vibrant and alive, especially those yellow flowers in the background. The aptly named devil thorn makes very beautiful flowers that make these yellow mats. Are certainly quite attractive, but of course step in these at your own peril. They are incredibly painful, and there's generally quite a copious amount of thorns where they grow. And the waterbuck are looking quite happy in the grazing area as they navigate through the mud there. Quite a selection of different birds. I see some moorhens and the ever-present blacksmith lapwing in the background, pretty as always. There's also a white-faced whistling duck popping out, but a very idyllic and peaceful day at Tile, as it always is. Looks like the grass has actually got quite long the last while. I imagine the animals have dispersed quite a bit with the rains. Not necessarily feeding too much in the area. Normally there's quite a large bare and barren patch around the waterhole. It's all covered by wonderful vegetation at the moment. Of course the waterbuck will generally stay put. It's more their type of habitat. There's no need for them to disperse or look for other food sources or grazing when they've got this at their disposal. A few ducks sliding in there. It seems like our waterbuck have decided they're also thinking of leaving. Seems like we might see them cross the open water there. Looks like the rest of the herd is meandering off in that direction. That's maybe where they're on their way to. we're gonna leave our very peaceful water buck to go about their business. There's some ostriches that have arrived at Tortillas. It's quite a nice surprise. The male is looking very stunning in his breeding plumage. We can see how pink his neck and face and legs are. He's trying to show off to the females, and seems like he has got himself a date or partner that's joined him for a drink. But I'm sure this is his mate slash partner. I doubt they've laid any eggs. They don't normally leave their eggs alone. They generally take turns incubating them. The male will also incubate at times. But wow, Tortillas has actually been quite productive today. We've seen a lot of interesting things here today. Certainly very interesting birds. It's sometimes one forgets they are birds. They look so different compared to other birds. But nonetheless, it's still a very effective and well adapted bird to the plains of Africa. Able to run quite fast and are very nimble. Only really susceptible to the ambushes of lions and leopards in close quarters, but in open plains the advantage is certainly to them, and they can do quite a bit of damage with those long legs and sharp claws of theirs. A kick from an ostrich can be fatal. They've had a quick drink. It seems like they're getting going again. Wendy, you'd like to know why did modern birds lose their teeth? So the main reasons just off the bat would be weight reduction. Obviously, one single beak is a much lighter structure than a mouthful of teeth, etc. So obviously for flight this is quite important. Not that all birds are incredible, ostriches for example are flightless, but it is a trait that is shared. But that's one of the reasons. It also allows for quicker development. So when birds do not incubate for incredibly long time before they hatch, and having a toothless beak enhances this, because it takes time for teeth to individually develop, etc., and they have to be rooted, and it's quite an intricate structure, whereas a beak is much quicker to develop and doesn't require as much work to or to form and develop. Of course, also birds tend to swallow their food whole, so the requirement for teeth for them is also indifferent. They make use of their gizzards, or they grind their food up in their gut. So some birds swallow small pebbles or rocks that they can pass or regurgitate. But yeah, there's no point in having teeth if you don't need to chew your food either. It's often why we see birds catching things that looks much larger than they could feed, but at the same time they swallow their food whole. As long as it can fit down their neck and they can swallow it, then it's perfectly fine, and they continue to digest it further in their stomach. A few superb starlings jumping around there, but they've now left us. Actually zoned out for a second. There was also a giraffe in the background. So focusing too much on the birds. Typical habits of a bird watcher. And there's our hidden giraffe slowly making its way in for a drink. Also a bit of a superb starling roosting there in one of the branches or bushes, hopping around. Quite nice to see this giraffe come in for a drink. Quite funny, the giraffe looks a little short. Obviously there's a bit of a depression at the back there, but she'll slowly appear. And the zebra is bringing their best table manners to the front and just wading through the water, stirring it up a lot, I'm sure. Doesn't bother them too much. You can see how they carefully negotiate their way out of the rocks in this waterhole here. Just have to step a little carefully, don't want to injure themselves. obviously always a bit of a acrobatic feat for a giraffe to get its head down for a sip of water. I'm sure it's also a bit more complex when the edges of the waterhole are as rocky as the ones here by Tortoise Camp. But nonetheless, they are quite able and agile enough to get it right. And the ostrich pop up there behind the giraffe as well. Quite a lot of life going on around the waterhole here today. I'm not sure how close that ostrich was to the giraffe, but it would not be a good idea if it startles it. A kick from those legs would do quite a bit of damage. See the ostriches eating some leaves from that shrub over there. I'm not sure what it would really want from those leaves, but nonetheless, there may have been an insect there. Africa, you'd like to know, why do male giraffes engage in the necking fights as we know them? So obviously it's their way of establishing dominance. Female's not a good example. You can tell it's a female. She's still got hair on her ossicones at the top of her head. You can also see her udder at the back there, but yeah, it's not a good example of explaining ossicones too much. Not as well developed as they would be in a male, or have such a large bony skull. But yeah, just to establish dominance between males, and obviously the one that wins the fight is the dominant one that has rights to mating with the female. But yeah, I think it also suits their anatomy quite well. It's not like they can really lock horns or effectively fight for males, or that fencing in a way that we see with other antelopes. So it's quite a unique way of fighting that they've obviously developed over thousands of years. Interesting how certain things like that come about, but that's relatively the way it is. I'm sure there is a much more intricate way, but I still think at the best it's quite an interesting and novel way of establishing dominance.
Best sighting I've presented. I found myself with wild dogs. We chased the dogs around, chased them around. They ate an impala. We got the end of that. Then another impala went into Gowrie Dam down the road there, and the wild dogs went around. Eventually the impala came close to the bank. One wild dog went and grabbed it and then just pulled it out and just did what wild dogs do. It was an emotional experience, but it was very, very special.
Join our expert guides at dawn for a live, immersive safari as the bush comes to life.
Found ourselves a chameleon, and look how he's changed color.
Every sunrise brings new discoveries.
Pound for pound, a leopard is one of the strongest cats around.
Ask questions, share your thoughts, and connect with nature live and in real time.
Great excitement, great happiness.
Start your day with adventure.
Or measuring up against each other with younger bulls practicing their sparring skills, and then these more dominant bulls will move into an association or grouping of females looking for a female that's an estrus that they can mate with. Obviously a female that's an estrus may attract quite a few males, and those are those dominance fights that we tend to see taking place, while the males vie for the right to mate with a female. But it is quite funny. One would assume they tend to have a bit more of a fixed or specific structure, and there's actually nothing specific taking place necessarily. Just a quick change there. Come over to Camelthorne Farmstead in Botswana. Also looking stunningly green and vibrant, lush at the moment. Quite nice to see the hippos out and about grazing. I know I've mentioned at times how the animals are lawnmowers, but I think when it comes to being a true lawnmower, the white rhino and the hippo are the real lawnmowers of the bush. With those big wide lips and large mouths, they can really keep or crop the grass quite shortly. These hippos aren't feeling the effects of the sun too badly, and they're wanting to make the most of this greenery that's surrounding them. Fortunately for them, they don't exactly have to spend too much time out of the water. The grass is right on their doorstep, so if the sun gets a bit brutal, they can quickly return to the water. But interesting to see them grazing like this at the moment. But I would assume it's mainly they're trying to make the most of the opportunities they can after the hardships from the dry season. Also a few alert impala at the back there. But it is fantastic to witness the miracle of all the transformation that's taken place. It was so dry and barren in the dead of winter here. It's amazing to see how it's transformed. What an interesting. Ooh, some of the hippos are right there. One's off to the safety of the water. That's a good example of a hippo's natural first instinct. If it's surprised or feels endangered, they'll head instinctively straight back to the water. And that's often what I say. If you are between the hippo and its route to the water, you're going to come off second best because it will run straight over you. But since something gave our hippos a bit of a fright, and all disappeared a bit, we're going to go to founders for the last bit of the show. We'll finish off there. Well, that's quite a fantastic and beautiful close-up of a rhino to finish up the show today. Good way to close off the last couple of minutes. Also see a few oxpeckers keeping it company. This of course being the red-billed oxpecker. Certainly looking a lot more windy than when the show started. You can see the bushes moving quite a bit and dust whipping around. But yeah, thanks again to everyone for all the wonderful and interesting questions. I think there was a couple of interesting ones that came through, a couple of interesting topics we covered. We certainly had some great and interesting sightings around the bird front. And the animals also certainly, or the mammals certainly gave us a bit more interaction than I would have expected, so it was nice to see all of that. And I look forward to seeing everyone over the next couple of days leading up to Christmas. You can see this builder is very carefully approaching this cow. I don't think she's in the mood for his advances.